much believe that there's only one label that matters for all of us, and that's DentaQuest, right? All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jesus, where are you, to get the program going.
Thank you, Dave. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Jesus Jimenez. I am a business analyst at DentaQuest, and I'm also a member of the steering committee for Adelante, the Adelante Employee Resource Group, or ERG. For those who don't know, actually, Dave, I think you just mentioned it, Adelante means to move forward. So that's what we want to do with Adelante. We want to move forward to the next step, to the next goal, to the next accomplishment. What is an ERG? It's a group of employees that come together. They share ideas, serve as a support system to foster awareness, respect, and inclusion. The question I get asked a lot is, what does an ERG do and why should I join? This was a difficult question for me because I didn't know. But what I'm going to do today is share some of the things that we want to do with Adelante. So the 4 things we want to focus on is professional development, volunteering, education, like cultural education, and networking. Let's meet people that are outside of your departments, outside of your offices, and let's connect. At the end of the day, what we want to make sure is that any event that we put together, we want to make sure that it provides value to our members. So that's one of the key things that we want to do with everything that we do with Adelante. What I've come to understand is that the ERGs can mean different things for different people. So for me, one of my key areas, or one of the key things I want to do with Adelante, it's professional development. I want to keep moving forward, but sometimes I don't know how to. We have a lot of great people here at DentaQuest, so what I want to do is I want to lean, I want to learn, and I want to grow. All right, the other thing I want to do is I want to have fun. So we work hard, we should also play hard. I encourage everyone to ask an Adelante member, what do you want to get out of this ERG? All right, what we're doing. We've had several past activities, upcoming events, volunteering next week, Hispanic Heritage event that's going on along the different sites, and then we have a few workshops that are coming up. All right, moving on to success stories with Andy Vargas. I want to thank one of our board members for coming up with the idea to create a forum where we share stories of positive impacts of Latinos, of Hispanics, of immigrants, of DentaQuest people, where we can share these positive stories made, and we can learn and we can get inspired together. This is called Adelante Success Stories. This same person was responsible for sharing Andy's story with the board. Because of her, we have Andy here today. So, Lina Lorenzo, I can't see you, but I'm sure you're out there. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much for your work, for your collaboration, and for making today happen. Appreciate it. Let's give her a big round of applause. All right, that being said, this has been a true team collaboration. I want to thank the board members who took the heavy lift of creating the ERG. I want to thank our members enterprise-wide. We wouldn't be here today without your help. One last thing to emphasize is ERGs are open to all DentaQuest employees. Doesn't matter if you're Latino, African American, or a veteran. Please join today. Join them all if you want. We also have members of our executive leadership team with us today. Cheryl, Dave, thank you very much for coming. Dave is our executive sponsor as well, so thank you for your help and your assistance. All right. Without further ado, our guest of honor, this person interned for the Obama during his presidency. At the age of 22, was elected to the city council, then became the first Latino elected to the Mass House of Representatives from the 3rd Essex District. I introduce to you all State Representative Andy Vargas, who's here today to share his story.
Thank you, Jose. It is such a pleasure to be here with all of you. Un saludo a toda la gente in Wisconsin and Texas and Florida. We see you guys. Woo! It is really great to be here with you. And you guys didn't tell me you were going to have espresso and patelitos. Is this every Thursday? Because I'm coming by here. That is amazing. Look, again, my name is Andy Vargas. I have the pleasure of being the state representative for the 3rd Essex District, which encompasses the city of Haverhill, just 35 miles north from Boston. I will keep this portion very brief because I want to get into the conversation and answer questions from you guys and make sure that this time is valuable. But I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. First and foremost, I start with my family because, like many of us with a Latino heritage, that's probably one of the most important influences in our lives. Both sides of my family come from this small pueblo in Dominican Republic called Bonao. Anybody ever heard of Bonao? Raise your hand. Bonao, Dominican Republic. Okay, awesome. They came to the United States like many other immigrants seeking opportunity, and they started in New York, where all the other Dominicans live, by the way. And my grandmother on my mother's side worked 3 jobs in New York. My grandfather on my dad's side worked 3 jobs in New York, and they both eventually found their ways to Massachusetts, and my mom and dad met here in Massachusetts. My dad worked in one of the last shoe factories in Haverhill. Haverhill used to produce 1 out of every 10 shoes in America. It's a small post-industrial city that once had a population of about 150,000 people. We're down to 65,000. But you can imagine the story that creates for a community with jobs going overseas. At one point, we used to have over 300 shoe manufacturers there. But I digress. Back to my family. I was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and when I was 6 years old, my mom and dad said that it was time to pick up and move north because the housing costs in Cambridge were just too expensive. And I remember distinctly crying my way all the way up I-93 and 495, because as a 6-year-old, you're this tall, and you're like, I'm leaving the city, right, where there's the lights, the vibrance, the bikes, the cars, the noise. And I'm moving to this random town called Haverhill. Like, what is this? Where are we going? For me, that was like a campo, right? Like, Haverhill is a city on its own, but moving from a big sort of metropolitan area to a mid-sized city is like night and day for a lot of people. And so for the longest time, like most young people that come from small to mid-sized cities and towns, I made it my goal, frankly, to get out. That was my goal. I said, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to go to public schools, graduate from Haverhill High, get the best grades I can, and move to a big city, because I remember those days riding my bike, as a 5-year-old through Cambridge. And for the longest time, that was my plan. In high school, I participated in a statewide coalition called Teens Leading the Way, which brings young people across the Commonwealth together to talk about the issues that affect young people the most and why those issues aren't at the table at the State House. And so when I was involved, we picked the issue of civic education, because we thought that we can't even begin to address all the issues that affect young people until young people are engaged, until young people will create a seat at the table if there isn't a chair there for us already. And so we drafted legislation as 16-year-olds to make civic education a graduation requirement across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We had 48 co-sponsors, bipartisan support on the bill, and I remember my first time walking into the State House as a 16-year-old and rolling my eyes thinking, these politicians just want to take pictures with us cute teenagers. They really don't care about our bill. But no, one by one, we had 48 co-sponsors sign on, Democrats, Republicans, made it through the hoops and hurdles of various committees, ended up dying in Ways and Means. But that's the story of most bills, frankly. And it was less about passing that bill. It was more about the process to which I, as a young person, experienced drafting legislation, getting co-sponsors, building support, watching Democrats and Republicans, people who normally disagree, come together around an issue. And that inspired me. And so I decided that I wanted to go on to Boston University, study political science, international relations, did a couple of internships on Beacon Hill, spent some time in Madrid in the U.S. Embassy over there, helping small, medium-sized businesses in the U.S. export their products out to Spain. So I could walk out of there and say that I helped increase our country's GDP. And at that point, I said, I've got this clearance for the embassy in Madrid. I'm not a Harvard or a Yale student, but I've got this security clearance, and I might as well apply to a couple of internships down in D.C. And I remember looking at the White House internship, requirements, 3.8, GPA, Harvard, Yales are usually the folks that they take. I had a 3.3 from BU, but my mom has this saying, she says, soñar no cuesta nada. The dream doesn't cost anything, right? Unless the application costs something, and luckily it didn't. So I submitted my application at like 11:59 p.m. It was due at midnight. And vamos a ver. And I ended up getting it. And they offered this random kid from Haverhill, Massachusetts, an internship in the Office of Communications at the White House, drafting op-eds, doing field research, everything from Latin America, Cuba policy. Cuba actually happened while I was there, which was incredibly exciting to be at. And I spent 60 hours a week working for free for this administration, which is another conversation. But, and I was effectively doing it, right? That dream, quote unquote, or that idea I had as a kid of like, I need to get out and just go to a big city and I need to be there, right? I was doing it, but there was still something missing, right? I was about to graduate. I could jump into a full-time role into the White House. And instead, I decided to come back home to Haverhill because I saw how much of a problem that whole ideology was of young people need to get out of small to mid-sized cities, and we need to go to big cities where it's happening, whereas Dominicans say, "Está en el can." And so instead of that, I kind of threw all that away, came back home, looked around, saw that nothing had really changed in Haverhill. Saw that teachers were some of the lowest paid across the Commonwealth. We were 6th in the state for opioid overdose deaths. Abandoned buildings and factories downtown, as I mentioned earlier. We used to have so many shoe manufacturers. And not much had changed. And so I said to myself, how irresponsible of me if I just leave this. And then I looked around. I looked at the city council, the school committee, the mayor, the city clerk, the dog catcher. I couldn't find one Latino, mind you, one person of color that was in elected office. By the way, dog catcher is not elected office. So I said, you know what? And on top of that, the average age of the elected official in Haverhill was 61. Nothing wrong with being 61, but there are other people in the community that aren't being represented. And so at 21 years old, I walk into City Hall with my big Dominican family. And they had like a guira and tambora, I kid you not. It was so embarrassing. To pull papers to run for city council. And going around town, people would give you the whole like, oh, you know, it's so nice to see a young man running for office. You know, if you don't get in this time, you'll get in the second time or third time you run. And we just kept at it. We kept knocking doors across the city. We knocked on a total of 7,500 doors in that race, and we won. And so I got elected to the city council at 22 years old. And then last year, after sort of ending my second year of my first term on the city council, this seat for state representative opened up. And we decided to jump in. We won, and here we are. And now I have the pleasure of spending some time with you guys here. Great.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do like questions and answers, kind of like a talk show mode. So for those who don't know me, I am Maribel Collazo. I'm a technical advisor here in Massachusetts, and I'm sure I've helped some of you managers, hiring managers out there in the IT world. I probably help you out throughout the years. So I just have the pleasure of talking to Andy, and right now we're going to base the conversation and the questions on inspiration. So,
great.
Thank you. So Andy, I'm also an ERG member. I didn't say that, and Adelante, an ERG member of Adelante, and I'm originally from Puerto Rico. So I have a few questions for you. What was your inspiration for you to get where you are today? What was your inspiration? If you could share that with us.
Yeah, I mean, I think I talked about a couple of the different pieces that inspired me to come back to Haverhill. But I think one of the strongest influences was just growing up in the family that I grew up in. I grew up in a very large Dominican family that at every single holiday party there was some sort of debate, some conversation about whether it was gay marriage, the economy, U.S.-Latin American relations, Fidel Castro, la economía. It was nuts. But growing up in that environment, I would hear, on my right, my uncle who religiously watches Fox News. And then on my left, my aunt, like literally on my left and my right, who likes Fidel Castro, sitting at the same table, debating, going back and forth. So as a teenager, you're kind of just sitting there like, ooh, that's a good point. Like, ooh. And you're soaking it all in, right? But the most beautiful thing about it was that at some point, I would have an aunt walk into the room and just say, ya basta, ya. La comida está lista. Everybody shut up. It's time to eat. And when the food would come in, that was it. That was it. We still ate together as a family. And so I think, watching what has happened to our politics, what has happened to our democracy, to civility in this country, I thought that I had something to offer. Growing up in that environment, understanding that you can vehemently disagree, but still come to the table together as one big American family.
Thank you, Andy. Andy, my mother always tells me accomplishing your goals is more about the journey rather than the destination. I don't know if your mother has anytime said anything like that to you, but could you share with us which part of the journey have you enjoyed the most?
I think there's a lots of lessons to draw from the many journeys that we go through our careers or through personal life. But I would say, the time I've spent being an elected official, I think, have been one of the most rewarding times. I mean, it's not financially. I'll tell you, it sucks financially. But personally, right? I mean, the fact that I get to wake up every single day and think about how can I improve either one person's life or on a macro level through policy, improve thousands of lives. And that's powerful, to be able to wake up knowing that that is your mission for the day, every single day, day in and day out. And so I think, whether it was on the city council and I would get calls about potholes and, education funding, infrastructure, or now where we're talking about macro level health policy in Massachusetts and education funding as well. I think the journey that I'm in right now and the journey that I went through on the city council, I think, were some of the most not only formative years for myself, but I think rewarding as well.
Thanks. In one of your talks, you actually made reference to Obama's existential question and his answer. And so I wonder if you don't mind sharing Obama's answer to the question, what is the key to living a fulfilling life? And then if you could also share with us, where did that personal quest come from?
Yeah. So when you're an intern at the White House, they bring in all different types of people to come talk to you. And we had heard from, Joe Biden, who, by the way, stayed for 3 hours. We were like, yo, you don't have something to do? Like, you vice president. Michelle Obama, the chief of staff. It was great. It's like we had our own little, intern ERG group. It was awesome. But there were 2 weeks left, and the interns had only engaged with the president on a sort of professional level, certain meetings and stuff like that, but we never had the opportunity to kind of ask him questions in an intimate setting. And finally, they made the time with 2 weeks left. And I remember we were in the east wing of the White House, and then he comes with his swagger, and I'm like, my heart is like, it's like, yo, it's very cool. It's okay. It's just the president, And, a lot of us are getting ready to graduate, and one of my peers asks him the existential question that we were all thinking about, which was, Mr. President, what's the key to living a fulfilling life? And you can hear the eye rolls in the room, like, oh my God. And the president sort of, paused, and he leaned in and he said, look, let me be clear. He said, my aide's dying laughing in the back because she's seen this way too many times at this point. He said, the key to living a fulfilling life is don't think about who you want to be. Think about what you want to do. Because ever since we were this tall, pequeñito, we were asked, do you want to be a lawyer, a doctor, a congressman, a CEO, a scientist? And those are all great things, but they're all titles, right? And the problem is that, take, for example, Congress today. We have a lot of people that woke up one day and said, I want to be a congressman. And that was it. And so naturally, their whole existence becomes around self-preservation of that title, as opposed to, I want to be the congressman that fights for working people. I want to be the scientist that cures cancer. I want to be the CEO that pays a living wage. Those are specific things you want to do, as opposed to the title. And so hearing that, I kind of went home that night, and like I said, I started reflecting on the fact of, well, why do I want to leave Haverhill? What really is it about that? What am I driven by? And it was really just superficial. It was just that as young people, we like to be in big cities, and we think that that's where we're supposed to be. When in reality, where we're needed most is probably back home or in small to mid-sized cities. So yeah, I would say, that experience certainly changed my lens of which I was thinking about what to do next with my life.
Great. Great, thank you for sharing. I have one last question, and I'm hoping that I have time. Any timekeepers? Okay. And I want to thank, it came from one of the sites, I think it was Wisconsin or Texas, so I really love this question. So what would be the one thing you would tell a younger self if there is something you would change or do differently?
I think the main thing I would tell myself, well, a couple of things. One is just keep it big picture, right? Because a lot of times, whether it's young people, even now, we can get so bogged down with a specific issue or challenge or pain that we're going through in life. But keep it big picture, the trajectory of your life and who you are and your goals and what you're driven by. Whatever you're going through right now, whatever, pain or challenge that you think is in your way, just zoom out for a second and think about the big picture and what you're really trying to accomplish. I think that's one thing I would say, because I took way too many things too seriously. Heartbreaks from girlfriends, it was nuts. And then the other thing is, Winston Churchill has a quote that I sort of keep handy, which is, I am an optimist because it does not seem too much use to be anything else, right? Be positive. Stay optimistic. What does negativity even bring you, right? Now, it doesn't mean just be pie in the sky. You got to be pragmatic also. But it does not seem to be much use to be anything else than optimistic. So I think I would tell myself that.
Okay, great. So thank you. So we'd like to open it up to questions. Any questions from the audience and also from the site?
I have a question. Yeah. Eddie, can you talk a little bit about the landscape on the healthcare and what is your experience and how you're contributing to improve it?
Could everyone hear him, the question on the site? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I think, look, we are, in Massachusetts, we have, I think, a responsibility to lead. And no offense to the other states on there, I'm sorry. But look, the Affordable Care Act came about because we were a model here in Massachusetts. And so now I think we have a responsibility to think about what is the next frontier. Because we know that ACA was a step in the right direction, but boy, there's some holes that we've got to fill as well. So I think, one of my main things is trying to look at the feasibility of single-payer healthcare, whether or not that's even feasible. I think that if other countries have figured this out, if we can figure out how to ensure quality while keeping costs low, then let's go for it. But we should at least study it. And part of the problem is that people aren't even willing to study it at this point. So I know that last year there was obviously a big healthcare bill that we tried to get done on the Hill, where the Senate and the House had various differences, and we weren't able to get that done. But I know it's going to stay high on the priority list this year, at least in Massachusetts. But I think, the bottom line is that, in a country this big with so much prosperity, your income shouldn't determine whether or not you can beat cancer, get over an opioid addiction, have access to quality health care. I think we can do better, and I think we have a responsibility to do better.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Beyond your family, can you think of a professor or a teacher as you were growing up that helped influence going into politics?
Yeah. Absolutely. There were two teachers at my high school who are still there now, by the way, Mark Harvey and Tom Jordan. Both of them were just so animated in their classrooms. They were both history teachers. One was AP Euro and the other one was AP Government. And the fact that they were so animated and inspired us to see the power of history and how it can inform our decision-making now really, really influenced me. And then I would say in college also, there were a couple of professors who had, experience in the field that were willing to open up and share, what it was like to work at the State Department or at the White House. And those sort of little tidbits of knowledge were also inspirational and certainly helpful.
Any other questions from the site?
Yeah, Laura first.
Okay.
I have a question. Is from Florida. Can we ask a question, or is anybody else in Boston?
No, go for it.
No, go for it.
Okay. So, Andy, what obstacles have you encountered as you went through your journey, especially related to racism and prejudice? And how do you overcome them?
Hi, Lena. It's a great question. You know, when I mentioned when I pulled papers to run for city council, there was a lot of folks who were skeptical and said, you know, you run the second time, the third time, maybe you'll get in. So you get sort of the double of being young and then a Latino also. You know, there was an incident in my hometown where ICE officials came in without notifying local police that they were undergoing an operation, and this was shortly after the Trump administration came in. And so that's not a normal protocol, right? Usually when federal agencies come in, they tell local police this is happening, so there's no blue-on-blue fire, and so the communication is clear. But obviously with the change of administrations, the ICE feels like they have a little bit more authority. And it turns out they came to get somebody who posed no threat to public safety. It was somebody who was stopped on a traffic stop, was a hardworking person, didn't have any criminal record or background. So from my sort of vantage point, I said, look, people need to know at least what their rights are if somebody shows up to their home like this. So I went on social media and I posted what the constitutional rights were of anybody who is in the United States of America as defined by the Supreme Court. Boy, did I get some pushback. And this goes to show, you know, being Latino and the ways that you're sort of pigeonholed and bucketed. You know, I got the whole, you know, Andy's protecting criminals and wife beaters and rapists, and, you know, he supports illegal immigrants no matter who they are and this and that. So there's a lot of pushback. And the only way that we were able to sort of break through that, and frankly, part of the challenge is that there's a national narrative that happens, right? You know, you're hearing from, and they're on both sides, but, you know, Fox News in particular will tell you that this is what an illegal immigrant is, or this is what an immigrant is, right? And that trickles down to even the local level. And for us to combat that is very, very difficult. But the way that we did it was going door to door and spending as much time as possible with people that I disagreed with. And consultants will tell you that that's the dumbest thing you could do. I had every single consultant say, don't spend more than 5 minutes at a door. If somebody's disagreeing with you, just go to the next door because you can talk to 10 more people. But I threw that out the window, and I think part of it is because my family was so confrontational at the dinner table. But that, you know, being Latino, you do have to work harder. It comes with many blessings. It does. It comes with grit. It comes with tenacity. It comes with this sense of camaraderie. But it also, in this country, comes with many challenges. We have to work harder. So I had to knock on more doors. I had to have more conversations. I had to humanize the being that I am to a lot of people that had this image that had been built by either media outlets or biases that they've had around them. Hopefully that helps answer your question.
Anything else?
Anything else from Florida?
No.
All right.
Texas, we have a question. Texas has a question.
Okay.
We find that Latinos a lot of times aren't well informed about resources available for funding education, and it can be a barrier, of course. And some parents don't have the money for to send their children to college. So how can we provide more resources to the Hispanic and Latino community on college affordability and access, scholarships, grants, that sort of thing?
Yes, I think it's two-pronged. One is, you know, getting the information out there, and then the other one is sort of systemically changing the higher ed landscape. But so we'll start with sort of the information thing. And, you know, we hear this a lot in that, you know, why aren't Latinos showing up to parent-teacher conferences? Why aren't Latinos showing up to, you know, this college forum? We're actually having a college forum in my district tonight, ironically. And I'd say it's two-pronged. One is we've got to do a better job in the ways that we communicate with our community as well. We can't expect that, just a Facebook post on social media or a newsletter is going to get our community to come out. We have to think about where our community lives, where they communicate, where they gather. And I can give you two examples. One is during my campaign, we thought about, how are we going to activate Dominicans in Haverhill to turn out? And we said, well, where do they communicate right now? WhatsApp. So we created a big WhatsApp group, 100 Dominicans, just poured them all in there. And we said, we're holding signs at this time. We're doing the knocking doors at this time, right? And so, but you're going to where that community already lives in this digital ecosystem, not expecting them to come to you where you live and where you want them to come to you. It takes work. And the other example is I used to work for a nonprofit called Entrepreneurship for All. You guys should check it out if you haven't heard of it. And it's focused on accelerating entrepreneurs in small to mid-sized cities, because the idea is that there's so many entrepreneurs and incubators and VCs in big cities, but in small to mid-sized cities, if you're an entrepreneur, those resources aren't really there. And one of the things that we learned was the best places where we found our entrepreneurs wasn't online, wasn't on any of these things. We straight up went to barbershops, right? And we put our flyers up. You got an idea? We're having a pitch contest next week. Come on down. There's free food, by the way. We went to barbershops, restaurants, bodegas, right? You have to go to where people live. So on the outreach end, we've got to do a better job of that. And that also starts with having the right people in the right positions, ensuring that, when you can hire people who understand that community, understand how to reach our community, that's super important. On the systemic end of things, I think, look, in Massachusetts, 72% of the jobs that are going to be opening up within the next 20 or so years are going to require some sort of education after high school. And I think about, when we here in the Commonwealth, first made the commitment to public education, right? We said it's a problem that only a select few amount of people can afford education. So we're gonna take this responsibility on and provide public education. And we've defined that as K through 12, right? And we built the best workforce in the world by doing that. Now the problem is we're falling behind because our public education definition is very narrow for what it should be today. Today we now know that pre-K is probably the most important period of a child's life, yet we don't consider that yet as public education. And we also know that 72% of the jobs are going to require something after grade 12. So how are we not considering, some sort of post-secondary education as part of public education and ensuring that every single person has that right as we originally intended it to be? So we can get into debates around like how we can fund that, how we can make that happen, but I think we've got to also address the systemic issues around college financing as well.
Great, thank you. All right, we have a couple of questions in Boston. Do you want to use the microphone?
No. So I look around this room, and I've probably been alive longer than most everybody here. And I feel like our country is more polarized than ever in my memory. So as an insider, how do we bridge that gap, and are you optimistic we will be able to?
Yeah. So I'll start with the latter, and I am optimistic, and not just because what I said earlier about Churchill. I'm optimistic because I think we're seeing an unprecedented level of civic engagement now that we haven't seen maybe since the 60s, right? There are people who now have woken up and said, like, okay, like, maybe in the past I said politics is not for me, but it better be for me now because this guy's crazy. It's like, it's happening. Not to get partisan here, I'm sorry, guys. I don't even know if that's partisan at this point, but I honestly think that the trajectory of this will be that we will come out on top and better than we were before. Because I think the problem is that, we had Barack Obama elected, and we have a black president. You had enough people, walking around saying, well, America's not racist. We got a black president. Look at that. The opportunity that Trump has presented us is that we have all the issues on the table now, and we can get to the root of the problems. And it's a very, very uncomfortable conversation to have. But I think more communities are having that conversation. And I think it starts with, like I said earlier, going door to door, talking to your neighbors, trying to get them involved, if not with a party, then with a specific issue, right? Whether it's, expanding access to health care or funding education. There are issues that we have so much common ground on. And I'll tell you, I had Trump people vote for me, a Democrat. I don't think it's a surprise I'm a Democrat. But that doesn't happen without hard work, right? You've got to talk to people. You've got to humanize each other. And I think, that's why I'm optimistic. And then on the sort of the inside, I keep forgetting that I'm like inside now. I think particularly on Beacon Hill, my office is surrounded by Republicans. So almost every single piece of legislation I filed has been bipartisan. They've co-sponsored it. We've worked together on it. We're lucky to be in the state that we are. There are some real differences still, don't get me wrong. But the level of civility and humanity that we see, at least on Beacon Hill, amongst legislators, is something that I think Congress could learn from.
Thank you. And I know that, thank you. I know that we have another question. Do you need a microphone?
No, I'm good. It's a simple one. You speak so eloquently, I feel that I can listen to you for 3 hours and not get bored. Is it something that you've always had, the confidence to communicate, or is it something that you've kind of made a conscious decision and taken steps to improve and get to where you are?
Well, first of all, thank you. That's the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me. No, I still get nervous. I mean, walking in here, I was in the car with my aide, and I was like, I should probably look at some of the potential questions that are coming up. So I do still get very nervous. I think, with time and practice, and the more times that you push yourself into those situations, you'll get better. But there's sort of two things I'll share. One is, wow, I lost the other one. I'll share this one, though. There was a woman who was the head of this organization called the Participatory Budgeting Center. And she said something that stuck with me. She said, chase butterflies in your life. And what she meant by that was that feeling you get in your stomach when you're really uncomfortable, when you really don't want to be there and I'm not feeling good. Chase those butterflies. Chase those moments that put you in those uncomfortable positions, because you'll just continue to grow in doing that. And I think that has certainly helped me through this. Oh, now I remember the other thing. The other thing was that it's so much easier when you're just telling the truth, just being who you are. I think especially in this industry of politics, we can get so focused on, well, what do the polls say, right? And what, should I use this phrase or not that phrase? And to some degree it's important, right? Messaging. But when you are your authentic self, it becomes that much easier.
Great. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Oh, do we have time for 3 questions, Jesus?
I can take it.
Okay. I can't remember who said.
Right here in the back.
Okay. We got one here, and go ahead. Why don't you go ahead? Do you need a microphone?
No.
Okay.
I'm loud enough.
Okay.
Being a Hispanic, I feel like we have this perfect target of being a statistic. So my question to you, what helped you not become one?
It's a great question. And I think part of that challenge is what motivates me as well. I mean, I grew up very close to my cousins, all of which have been in and out of the criminal justice system. And the main difference between, my household and theirs was that I had 2 parents that stayed on top of me, right? So I'm very privileged in that sense. And I think part of our responsibility is to, recognize our challenges, but also recognize our privileges and how we can ensure those privileges are available for more folks down the line. But I think, in every single opportunity that came, in front of me, whether it was high school, college, the internship settings, I kind of had that in the back of my mind of okay, there are a few of us here, so I have this kind of burden on my shoulder to represent, right? To not be the image that many people have of what, Latinos or people of color are. So I guess having that sense of purpose and understanding that you're not only there for yourself, we're not only here for ourselves, we're here for our family and also for the idea of what people see in us. I think that helped motivate me.
Wonderful. Thank you.
How you doing? Good. Great. Thank you. I'm very impressed of your determination
and, you know, how eloquent you are when you are, like she said, you know, like how you express yourself. So the question goes back to family. Yeah. You know, it's such a young age. You know, where did you see yourself a few years from now? You know, what would you like to do different than you're doing now? Especially when I want to go home today, you know, I want to be able to tell my kids, you know, who are going to have a say in the next election, you know, where are we going to go? Yeah. So where do you see yourself and what kind of expectations do you have? Yeah.
U.S. President.
I don't know about that. Better chance at winning the lottery, maybe. I'd like to see myself in a nice, you know, boat near Punta Cana. No, look, I mean, any politician under the age of 60 that tells you they're not thinking about what's next is lying to you. For me, I really, you know, for example, when I was on the city council, I didn't have like, okay, my next thing is I'm going to run for state senate or state representative or mayor or this and that. Those were all sort of options that we were thinking about, right? But the way I thought about it was I tried to keep bringing myself back to the thing that Obama said, which was, don't think about who you want to be, think about what you want to do. So less about the titles and think about what are the tools that come with each of those positions that allow you to move the needle on issues that you're passionate about. So I thought about, you know, mayor for a little bit, because as a mayor you can change a budget for a city overnight practically from one year to the next, and your impact can be felt immediately, right? At the same time, at the legislature, you can work on macro level policy that affects thousands of people. And there's more complications in that you have to, you know, be a team player, work together, and there are more people that you have to work with. But then throw into the mix that the reality of politics is a lot of this is timing, right? You know, what positions become available, who do you think you could do a better job than, right? So there are all these different variables involved. So in terms of like laying out a specific vision of like, here's where I want to go, I'm less focused on that and more about like, all right, I want to make sure that the commuter rail is on time and fast. I want to expand access to healthcare, and I want to make sure that regardless of the zip code that you live in Massachusetts, you have access to a quality education. Now, let me figure out, you know, what are the vehicles to get us there as time goes on, right? So I'm in a vehicle right now with certain tools, and as time goes on, maybe another vehicle becomes available, but I've got to sort of stay focused on those issues at the same time.
Great. I know that, and we have another person too. Should we go to Texas? There's another question in Boston too.
And Milwaukee too as well.
Okay, Texas. All right, Texas?
So we have a question, Andy. If you could sit down and have some cafecito with anybody, dead or alive, who would it be? What would be the one question that you would ask them?
Oh, wow.
This is where you find out that I'm not a good public speaker. What a great question. I think I would sit down with my grandfather. He passed away when I was 11 years old. He was the voice of La Voz Dominicana in DR, in Santo Domingo. And he read a lot. He was a big Reagan dude, which was interesting to me. And I think I would just talk to him about, you know, his lessons in living through DR during one of the most oppressive regimes that this world has seen under Trujillo. And I'd sort of ask him ethical questions around what it meant to work in the communications industry during that time, and how he balanced, you know, putting food on the table for his family while also keeping his family secure, while also trying to, you know, be fair. And I think that it's something that I'm still thinking a lot about. And so I think I talked to my grandfather. We had Milwaukee, I think, had one. Oh, there was.
There you go. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. So if you could do anything differently, what would that be, or would you change anything so far?
Would I change anything so far? I might work out more. No, I mean, Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, if I could just keep, as a young person, if I could have just kept the big picture, I think that's something I would have done differently. You know, just think about, you know, whatever challenge I was going through at that time was absolutely nothing compared to the trajectory of life that hopefully we all get to live. So keeping the main thing.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
would change.
And
So, in the back?
Yes, Andy, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Great, congratulations. You've been doing great so far. I want to change a little bit here, the flow. How do you like to be called? Or do you have an apodo, nickname within your family or friends? And be honest.
Yeah. No, people call me Andy. My name is Andres, though. Andres Javier Vargas is my name. But my mom would call me Andy. My family members would call me Andy. In middle school, and again, you know, just being totally honest with, you know, the challenges of being Latino in middle school, people couldn't pronounce Andres. Either I get Dre, I get Andre, I get Andrea, I get, you know, Andrew, all this stuff. And so, you know, I stuck with what my mother would call me, what my family would call me, is just Andy. But you call me Pepe too, that's fine.
Arriba Quisqueya.
Arriba Quisqueya. Another one? Yep.
Growing up, coming from a family of immigrants, what's your view on immigration?
Ooh, how much time do we have? No, look, I think immigrants are, I mean, the core of this country. I just think, you know, the irony of this moment is so sad because this country was founded by immigrants and people who were coming because their land persecuted them or wasn't, you know, safe for them. And so for us to turn our backs on that is just not only disgusting, but not true to who we are as Americans. And so I think the reality is that there is a lot more common ground on this issue than people think. And I'll tell you a story about it really quickly. I mentioned going door to door during my campaign, and one of the main things that my Republican opponent was attacking me on was, Andy wants to make Haverhill a sanctuary city, and if he does that, you know, the rapists or wife beaters are going to come in, and it's all downhill. And so when I'm knocking door to door, you know, I have profiles of, you know, the voter that I'm about to knock on, and I see it's 77-year-old Dorothy. She's a longtime Democrat. I'm ready to give her my spiel. And she opens the door and she says to me, you know, Andy, I like you. You're a nice young man, but I don't know about this sanctuary city thing. Why would we have a nation? Why would we have a city without laws? Oh, my God. I thought I was talking to a Democrat. But the reality is that, you know, the most, and again, I'm trying not to get biased, the most watched news network in America is Fox News. And Fox News is in their living room every single night saying, this is the definition of a sanctuary city. It's a place where people run rampant, and there's rapists, and there's wife beaters, and there's all these crazy things, right? And so we started my campaign with trying to combat that by saying, no, here's the real definition of sanctuary city. You know, the media, you know, Fox News is lying to you, blah, 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 this and that. We pivoted from that and instead said, look, that term means different things to different people. So let me explain to you what my position is on immigration, and then you tell me what you think. And then I define sanctuary city without saying it. And they said, well, of course that makes sense. We want to go after people who pose a threat to public safety and leave hardworking folks alone. Of course. But we don't get there without having those conversations going door to door, without sort of keeping in mind that there's somebody in a good chunk of Americans' households every night at 7 p.m. telling them that these are the definitions to certain words. We have to keep all of that in mind as we build that common ground. But there's a lot of common ground to be had there. So I think, you know, immigrants are crucial to who we are as Americans, and we can't turn our back on that anytime soon or ever.
I have a question. Good.
Smiles.
So do you think we should have open borders?
No, I don't think anybody's saying that, right? I think,
I'm asking you a question, I'm not saying everybody.
Yeah. No. I think, like any nation, you should have, security at the border. I think you want to have a process for people to come in, absolutely. And this is where I say that there is common ground. Democrats and Republicans can both agree on border security. We have to up the security and ensure that, folks who are coming for bad reasons aren't coming. But at the same time, we have to make sure that there is a viable path to come, that there is a path, that there is a line somewhere, right, that there is a vision, there is a foreseeable future for folks that want to come here. And the problem right now is that process isn't very clear. And so I think, we've got to balance the fact that, yes, we need border security, but we also need a fair process for people to come to this country the right way.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
I do.
All right, in the back.
What advice would you give to a young immigrant in these times and in terms of social media and all the inflammatory comments? And as a young person, that can be overwhelming. Like, what would your advice be to somebody that is perhaps new to the country and is seeing all this stuff and they're going, holy crap, what is going on?
Yeah, I think, my advice would be is, first, thank you for, staying strong and hanging in there. And secondly, that the negativity that we see doesn't represent the vast majority of Americans. A lot of times the loudest voices that we hear are the most negative ones. But I don't know if Drake actually said this, but I'm going to quote him anyways. He said, wise man once said nothing at all. And I think that's very true. He probably stole that from somebody, but whatever. My point is that the vast majority of people aren't the negativity that you see on social media. And finally, you are worth so much. You are worth so much not only to yourself, to your family, but to this country. Latinos represent the fastest growing demographic in this country. When you look at the needs in our workforce, when you look at the needs to have young people replenishing our careers, we're essential, we're crucial. So you play a vital role not only for yourself and your family, but for the broader fabric of this country. Yep.
Hi there. What can I do? I'm a white woman. When I see things happening, such as I have a dear friend whose brother was deported. He is married to an American woman. He is an engineer, master's prepared, and he had a traffic violation. ICE came in and deported him to Mexico. I mean, what is my option other than obviously I'll vote? But what are my options when I see this stuff happening?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. You mentioned the first one, obviously, to vote. But the second one would be is tell that story to as many influencers and policymakers as you can. Because part of the problem is, again, who are we all hearing from? If we're just hearing from certain media outlets that these are the people that are getting deported, they're all gang members, and they're this, and this, naturally, people are going to start buying that. But we need to start telling the stories of families getting broken apart, good, hardworking, decent people that are contributing members to our society. So tell that story to policymakers, to people in your community, organize them, get them to show up, whether it's to your state house or to your congressman or congresswoman's office. Tell that story because that's a powerful one.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Back here?
Yeah. Just one quick question. While keeping your eye on the big picture, how do you keep from putting a ceiling on yourself or opportunities that you didn't reach?
Okay, so the question is, while keeping a big picture, how do you not put a ceiling on yourself, right? Yeah, I think, I think by keeping it big picture, you don't even think about a ceiling, right? You just think about I'm dedicated to these 3 things, and I'm going to try to move these things in the right direction. And as I do that, hopefully opportunities come up where I can take advantage of to either move up, whether it's within in your career setting or in politics, whatever it may be. If you're focused on specific issues, on solving problems, that next opportunity will come because someone will say, he's really good at solving this problem if you're in, a career setting, for example. And here's an opportunity where he would excel in an even greater degree. So I think it's maximizing the opportunity you have now and thinking about how that story that you're creating in the present moment applies to a bigger picture. So I don't think they clash. I think, they go hand in hand. Yeah.
Oh, there's one question in Milwaukee.
All right, back corner in Milwaukee.
Sorry. Hi. What would you tell for instance, I have a 10-year-old daughter, and I know you said, you talked about overcoming obstacles when it came to race and your age. How about the obstacles, because I know you had to experience it from both sides when it comes to, because your parents are immigrants, but you were born here. So you're not American enough, but you're not Dominican enough. And my daughter has gotten that. She's 10 years old. I remember getting that. So what advice would you give someone who's a teen or who's, in that age of 10 years old? Because living here confuses you. You don't know. It makes you feel like you don't belong anywhere.
Yeah.
So how do you overcome that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I struggled with it a lot as a young person. I talked about my cousins earlier. My cousins were the Poppin students in high school. They were popular and comprehensive in CP classes. I was in honors and AP classes and never really fit in either world. Right? I found that I wasn't hood enough to hang out with my cousins and everybody else, and then I wasn't white enough for the people in my AP and honors classes. So I was in this constant struggle. And what I wish I knew then that I know now is that it is an amazing blessing to be in that position because you learn how to navigate both settings. You learn how to build coalitions with both worlds, and you understand the pains, the opportunities, and the sometimes ignorances that live in both worlds. And so I tell your daughter that she's incredibly blessed with an opportunity to keep it, big picture, and to understand that, 10, 15 years down the line, the challenges that she's going through now are certainly going to pay off.
I just want to make a quick announcement, just a time check. So we're at 2:05. We have the room till 2:30. I believe across the other sites as well. So if we have more questions, I think we can continue. For those here who want refreshments, feel free as well. But I just wanted to be mindful of everyone's time.
Do we have any other?
Any other questions?
Okay, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Auntie, how is your dance with the merengue?
Could you repeat the question?
Dance with the merengue. Your dance. How is your dance with the merengue?
How well do you dance?
Do I have to demonstrate with it?
Do you have any merengue?
Are you a merengue or bachata? I like both, but merengue.
Okay.
I'm old school. My dad used to play Fernandito Villalona, Johnny Ventura, Tatico Enriquez. We're taking it way back. And the funny thing is, as a kid, I would always sit there and I'd be like, oh my God, why is he playing this old music? But now, as an adult, I'm like, man, this bumps. Like, this is great. This is awesome. So it's just interesting the way life works. But yeah, I love merengue. I was just listening to Fernandito Villalona this morning on my way into Boston, and it's played an interesting role in my life because who just put some music on over here? Let me give the mic to someone before I start dancing. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Right.
We have one more question before the end.
It's actually not a question, but I just kind of want to tell you, Andy, that I didn't know about you. Obviously, we're in Wisconsin. We don't know much about what's going on in the government in Massachusetts. But when I heard about this opportunity, I read a lot about you, and I am beyond words impressed by what you have done, and look forward to follow your example as a young but staffer.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. And let me just, I really appreciate that. Let me just end with that. You know, whether you're thinking about potentially running for office someday or like, no, that's not for me, that's crazy. Let me just say that there's a role for each and every one of you, whether you want to run for office, volunteer in a campaign, help write legislation. There's a role and I would say a responsibility for each and every one of you to get involved in some capacity. And I look forward to seeing how each and every one of you will do that. And I'll be happy to help along the way if I can ever be helpful. So thank you all very much.
All right, I just want to thank everyone for coming. Andy, appreciate it. The talk was awesome, so I know I'm excited. I hope everyone else is as well. I think we're just going to end it with Andy and Maribel dancing the merengue. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming.
I don't know.